This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. 2 days to the Reagan-Bush-Gorbachev three-way summit meeting here in New York. Mikhail Gorbachev arrives here tomorrow amid increasing economic, ethnic, and political turmoil at home. Soviet troops still in the killing fields of Afghanistan, and the U.S. presidency in transition. Soviet officials are talking up expectations of some super summit-level ideas and December surprises. CBS News White House correspondent Bill Plant reports President Reagan and President-elect Bush have a different slant on expectations. Bill?
Dan, on the eve of Gorbachev's arrival in the U.S., the Soviets are engaged in what seems to have become a pre-summit tradition, pumping up expectations and hinting at new initiatives. But George Bush made it clear today that as far as he's concerned, the U.S. isn't ready for a serious negotiating session.
There will not be any commitment on my part in terms of specific arms control proposals or things of that nature. It's the president's meeting, and I'm going there as vice president of the United States.
And in fact, Mr. Bush is not even taking his own top foreign policy advisors to Governor's Island. President Reagan's still technically in charge, but his lame duck status gives the Soviet leader an advantage.
He can't make any decisions. As a consequence, we've essentially lost the propaganda battle before it started. It's Gorbachev who can make one proposal after another, who can seem more forthcoming, who can seem more peaceful. And the United States, by the nature of the situation, can't respond.
Gorbachev will steal the show every time. He's awfully good at it, and he thinks about it ahead of time.
Public symbolism, coupled with personal relations, has defined the Reagan-Gorbachev Odyssey, a remarkable journey which began in Geneva with the 1985 Get Acquainted meeting. In Iceland, Gorbachev's October surprise on nuclear disarmament ended in failure. Just over a year later, Mr. Reagan brought Gorbachev to Washington to sign the INF Arms Control Treaty. Finally, Moscow, where Cold Warrior Ronald Reagan said he no longer considered the Soviet Union the evil empire.
I was talking about another time, another era.
Now, as the Reagan era ends, even if U.S. policy doesn't change, some predict that the Bush presidency will have a completely different style.
Where the Reagan personality was easier and based more on general concepts of his view of the relationship, I think Bush is likely to be more deeply involved in the detail.
Administration officials say they have absolutely no hint of any surprise Soviet proposals this week, but they acknowledge that whatever happens in Gorbachev's UN speech or in the meeting, they have little choice but to play it down. Dan?
Thanks, Bill. Mikhail Gorbachev flies to New York at the height of his popularity, at least as he is perceived outside the Soviet Union. At home, the Gorbachev popularity curve may already have started downward. It certainly appears to have at the very least leveled off. There seems to be growing disenchantment with his failure to deliver the goods, consumer goods. And there are omens of worse to come, as our Moscow correspondent Barry Peterson reports in the first of our series, The Winter of Discontent.
It is an early winter in this unforgiving land. People brace themselves against the biting cold. It is a bad sign that winter has come early, they say. A sign it will be hard and long. And in the Soviet Union, there is another bad sign, the grumbling, the questions. Where is the better life that Mikhail Gorbachev promised? It is not better, they say. It is worse.
We have a lot of lines. We have people who are angry. We have people who are against everything.
In Gorbachev's Soviet Union, food has become even harder to get. Once there was a selection, maybe 2 or 3 cheeses. Now there is only 1. Canned goods, only peas, nothing else. Rice, the birds who live in the store take first choice. There is a dangerous undertone to the complaints. We ate better, they say, in the days of Brezhnev. Gorbachev wants to create a system where people who work harder, who show initiative, earn more. But it hasn't happened yet. Maybe it won't. They grumble to one another these days. Maybe it never will.
This is their mentality, that the leader, a new king comes, and he'll give them bread, meat and everything.
Who's at fault? The machine just hasn't started yet, she says. Our people can wait a long time, he says. They're very patient. This is the man who is not patient, and he is fighting for his programs, some say his very political survival, with a tool no previous Soviet leader ever dreamed of using, television. Letting his people yell their criticisms and then answering them, lecturing, cajoling, joking. You'll never show this on television, one man shouted. Yes, we will, Gorbachev said, and he did. His shining moment, walking with the great communicator in Red Square last May. Some say Gorbachev is now the great communicator. In some Western European countries, Gorbachev does better in the polls than President Reagan.
He's willing to smile, and he's willing to touch and feel. There's a humanness about him that cuts the distance between what is our preconception of Soviet leadership. And we like that. I mean, he looks more like an American politician than almost anybody else from any other country that I've seen.
Such an incredible salesman of the new Soviet style that an English rental appliance company used an English voice and turned Gorbachev's television image into a television commercial.
You make regular payments. Okie dokie, you with me? You get service like renting, yeah, everyone? And after 3 years, you keep the set. Comprende?
And his partner in showmanship, Raisa, with her polished and nurtured image, is on Soviet television more often than most Politburo members.
Well, because she's nice, she smiles, she's thin.
On the world stage, she is Gorbachev's asset. At home, some grumble about her as well. Such fine clothes, such nice furs, and we still wait. Gorbachev's biggest asset has always been the belief he inspires in his own people, but people are becoming cynical about his chance for success. If the people give up, Gorbachev may just as well give up his dream of ever turning this country around. This country has a history stretching back a dozen centuries, has survived czars and revolutions. Now, those who follow Gorbachev most closely warn that this is one of his most dangerous moments.
There is a lot of impatience, so I don't think he has a whole lot of time.
If something happened to him, I'll immediately ask permission to go to the United States.
In the days of spring, he was as full of confidence as his country was full of hope. But spring has given way to winter, and a country's hope has given way to doubt. Barry Peterson, CBS News, Moscow.
And still to come on the CBS Evening News, more news of the day and an exclusive look direct from the battlefields of the war that brings Gorbachev to the United Nations, his losing battle for Afghanistan. Action today by a federal grand jury looking into the multi-million-dollar religious empire known as PTL and its founder, Jim Bakker. The results, after a 16-month investigation, the jury indicted Bakker, his top aide, and 2 other associates. Peter Van Sant reports.
And now, here's your host, PTL President, Jim Bakker.
He was the greatest money-raising TV evangelist of all time, a man who could summon millions of dollars through emotional appeals. Tonight, Jim Bakker stands indicted for allegedly misusing that money, charged with 24 counts of fraud and conspiracy to defraud the public.
Fraud in the name of religion is still fraud. Abuse in the name of religion is still abuse. That's what we're learning from PTL.
And Tammy Faye, I think the most exciting thing in all the world is our lifetime partnership.
Oh, Jim, I do.
Those partnerships are at the center of Bakker's indictment. More than $158 million were raised through the partnerships for construction projects that the grand jury concluded were never built.
I would say 95% of what's being said is lies. And I can document it.
I keep saying, what have we done? What in the world have we done? I can't figure out what we've done wrong.
In his makeshift church yesterday, Bakker said he would not get a fair trial and that if it would help Christianity, he would, quote, get a gun and blow my head off.
The PTL Television Network presents Jim and Tammy.
The PTL ministry became headline news when Bakker resigned in March of 1987 after admitting a sexual encounter with Jessica Hahn.
He is not a preacher going to jail for 40 years. He's a thief who has taken hundreds of millions of dollars.
If convicted on all 24 counts, Bakker faces a maximum sentence of 120 years in prison and a $6 million fine. Bakker still claims he will return to television with a new Jim and Tammy show and new appeals for more money. But this time, Bakker faces the real possibility that he'll be preaching from prison. Peter Van Sant, CBS News, Charlotte, North Carolina.
A dramatic development today in the trial of a New York man charged with beating to death the 6-year-old girl he helped raise. Richard Schlesinger is covering that case.
In a surprise move, lawyers for accused child killer Joel Steinberg tried to change his plea to not guilty because of insanity. They based their effort on the testimony of Steinberg's ex-lover, Hedda Nussbaum, who told the court Steinberg was unconcerned as 6-year-old Lisa, the child they had illegally adopted, lay in a coma.
Her perception of what's taking place that night is that everything is quite serious, that the condition is serious. His perception that it's all quite trivial. If she's correct, that's nuts. That's what I'm saying, quite simple, Judge.
In graphic testimony last week, Nussbaum described how Steinberg went to dinner as Lisa lay comatose. According to Nussbaum, Steinberg's advice to her was to breathe with Lisa and be in harmony with her.
What she has described are the actions of two totally crazy people.
Some legal experts were surprised by today's motion.
It shows a weakness in the defense case. It's a desperation act.
The judge dismissed the effort to change Steinberg's plea for now, but said he might reconsider it in the future, adding yet another twist to the trial that has captivated New York for more than a week. Richard Schlesinger, CBS News, New York.
Paul Kirk is stepping out as Democratic National Chairman. He announced today he will not seek a new term. Kirk's departure is expected to result in heavy competition for a successor and for the whole direction of the Democratic Party.
Who also love cereal. Actually, it's kind of small news when you look at it. It's Sunsweet bite-sized pitted prunes. Try them on your cereal, and you'll agree Sunsweet bite-size is just the right size.
NASA has cleared Space Shuttle Atlantis to return to Earth at 6:36 Eastern Time tomorrow evening. Main mission reportedly accomplished. Deployment of a $500 million spy satellite over the Soviet Union. The 5 shuttle crew members aren't alone in orbit. Also flying high now, 5 cosmonauts and a Frenchman on a Soviet mission. All told, 11 people in space, tying the all-time record. CBS News correspondent Bruce Hall reports this isn't the only reason things are getting crowded up there and dangerous.
At the U.S. Space Command in Colorado, they're not only tracking the shuttle and the newly released $500 million spy satellite, they're trying to keep them both from hitting any of the more than 7,200 pieces of space junk that are crisscrossing the Earth at startling speeds.
Things are going in every different direction. You can have head-on collisions in space, and in head-on collisions in space, you're talking at velocities of the order of 10 miles a second. And at those velocities, the kinetic energy is tremendous.
Most of the junk is fragments from 10-year-old rockets and boosters, but they're also tracking lost cameras, wrenches, and even an astronaut's glove.
There goes a foot restraint into orbit.
At least one shuttle has already been hit. On the 7th mission, a small paint chip hit the windshield, creating a 1/4-inch crater. Since then, NASA has been running tests using small BB-sized pellets. The result? A hole the size of a dime in an aluminum plate. But if the debris were as large as 4 inches,
it would be catastrophic. It would be like a small bomb going off.
The problem is that things are being put up there. The debris is being created faster than what is coming down into the atmosphere and burning up.
Ignition and liftoff. In the future, NASA may have to install armor before launching spacecraft to protect them from 30 years of littering in space. Bruce Hall, CBS News, Johnson Space Center.
Said today that PLO leader Yasser Arafat will meet tomorrow in Stockholm with a group of American Jews. It said the group represents, and I quote now, a significant part of American Jewish opinion. Israel has said that such talks would be, quote, extremely damaging. Arafat was denied a U.S. visa last month to address the United Nations. Mikhail Gorbachev's United Nations speech is expected to deal at least somewhat with the now suspended Soviet invasion force pullout from Afghanistan. It is also expected to be discussed in his summit talks with President Reagan and President-elect Bush. Soviet officials held their highest level meetings yet with invasion resistance fighters this past weekend. Meanwhile, the Soviets have mostly kept from the world details of just how much fighting rages on inside Afghanistan. It has even escalated some places, which is why the Soviets have had to put more troops and equipment back in. Tonight, we begin our exclusive series, Afghanistan, the Soviet Failure. The road to Jalalabad is the main road from Kabul east to the border with Pakistan. This 100-mile lifeline is virtually the only link between the capital and the east. For the Soviet-backed government, keeping the road open is vital. These rebel mujahideen have one goal: shut it down.
Operation Arrow was launched in order to cut the highway between the two major cities in order to facilitate the fall of Kabul in Jalalabad by sieging it.
Their objective is ambitious. The mujahideen plan to attack the road between Sarubi and Jalalabad and then hold it. 36 miles, defended by a string of fortified Afghan army garrisons. 4,000 resistance fighters, broken up into small groups, have marched here from bases inside Afghanistan. They are members of NIFA, the National Islamic Front for Afghanistan. For these mujahideen, carrying out a coordinated attack along a 36-mile road will be a severe test of their military skills. The attack began October 23rd. It was filmed simultaneously from opposite ends of the battle zone. These pictures were taken at the western end near Sarubi by Ron Piers and Walt Shipley. You can see a group of mujahideen advancing on a small post along a ridge. Their main objective is a garrison down below. The mujahideen must clear a minefield first and then fight their way down. But that's not going to be easy. You can actually see Soviet-supported troops running to reinforce their positions. They also get Soviet air support. But anything short of a direct hit is a waste of air firepower. The resistance fighters keep up the pressure. Using light artillery and rocket-propelled grenades, they eventually take the exposed position. That truck was a well-stocked machine gun position. Still, the mujahideen can't move on the main position down the road. Not as long as that Soviet T-55 tank is in the way. They try to take it out with artillery fire, but keep missing. Finally, some of the mujahideen managed to fight their way down onto the road. The tank has been destroyed with an anti-tank missile.
It's a 100% successful operation.
Fighting like this is going on along the 36-mile front. More than 20 government positions are under attack. These mujahideen say this attempt to seal the road to Jalalabad is their most sustained attack of the war. The next objective is a bridge. Blowing it is easy. But it is not easy to say goodbye to the man who cleared the minefield, the man they call Green Eyes. One of his legs was blown off when he stepped on a mine. Amazingly, casualties have been relatively light. And this fighter is thankful. The pictures you have just seen were taken at Sarubi, at the western end of the battle zone. Hamilton Ketty and Karen Wimberger filmed the battle in the east near Jalalabad. The terrain here is obviously different. It is open and desolate. The target is a large fortified Afghan army garrison. The rebels warn traffic on the road to stop. Sensing trouble, the base is reinforced. the Mujahideen launch an artillery barrage. The garrison's main building is an easy target. It sticks up like a sore thumb and can be seen for miles. The rebels' strategy is classic and simple. Soften the enemy, then send in ground troops. With cover from artillery and machine gun fire, the Mujahideen make their move.
We get very good news. Now, Mujahideen inside the post, they catch the post, finished, soldier, everything's finished.
But not for long. Government reinforcements pour in. The Mujahideen must retreat into the hills. All over eastern Afghanistan, there is intense fighting. Soviet troops have mostly withdrawn, but in a desperate attempt to prevent the collapse of government forces, the Soviets now are conducting some of the heaviest bombing of the war. To avoid American Stinger anti-aircraft missiles, the Soviet planes fly so high you can hardly see them, but you can hear them. The Mujahideen say that during this operation, which ended November 7th, the road between Kabul and Jalalabad was closed. They say scores of vehicles were destroyed and hundreds of government soldiers killed. In Kabul, the Soviets drive Scud missiles around town in what Western diplomats say is a clear attempt to bolster the regime and intimidate the public. Tomorrow night, in our next report, we'll take a look at Kabul. Life here is beginning to fray at the edges. There is a sense that this is the beginning of the end. Special sadness in that story for us. Karin Wimberger was the translator and sound person for one of the camera crews in tonight's report. She was no stranger to the place nor to its dangers. She had been inside 5 times before. This time, while covering that fierce battle, she was found to have contracted hepatitis. Her colleagues were trying to get her out, get her proper medical care, when she died November 17th. Karin Wimberger, of Seattle and our hearts, was 29 years old. That's the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
Assignment Gorbachev. From the United Nations to Communist Cuba to a superpower meeting. Watch 48 Hours for continuing coverage, live Thursday.
This is CBS.
Lesson from Presidente Hotel.